That's one. Oh. Yep. Okay. So we've got 3 sessions today. We've got 3 proposals. We're going to deal with some of the administrative stuff and so on, and then we'll do a proposal per session. Start off, we've got some administration stuff, the agenda, action items, PDP overview, Secretariat report on policy implementations. Adam will give us that, and then we'll deal with Prop 111 in this first session. After morning tea, coffee, we'll have the Secretariat report on policy documentation that's been posted. There's been some stuff put on the website about, or the mailing list about that, and then we'll look at the proposal about the NECAS to support DNS. And then after lunch, we'll look at the third proposal we have about allocating those 2 blocks out of the 1.0.0.0 and 1.1.1 as research prefixes. We also want to, at the end, towards the end of the last session, to consider some stuff about community consultation. We have an issue that we have a number of people who can't get to these meetings, and yet still it's important that their voice is heard in how we make decisions. So our consensus process is open to all the community, not just the people who are in this room, and it's important that we find ways to include them. So we've got some ideas about that. And then if we've time for any other business at the end, we'll look at that. I'm going to try pressing this button again. You're getting a lot of echo. All right. So just a little bit of who's who stuff. Well, you sort of, hopefully you've worked out who I am. I'm Andy, Policy SIG Chair. Masato Yaminishi, who's my co-chair. I just also wanted to mention that about the NRONC, ASOAC, we have 3 members there. I was on the ASO until December last year, and I stepped down from that, and I've been replaced on there by Aftab Siddiqui. I don't think, is Aftab? He's not here at the moment, but if he comes in later on, I'll introduce him to the community. We also have Naresha Jwani on the NRO, and we have Tomohiro Fujisaki, if he would, just so people know. Those 3 members are our sort of liaison and our link from policy with ICANN, and they also consult and meet with members of the other members of the other RIRs who are on that committee. So there's 15 people on that, from the 3 from each of the 5 RIRs. Yep. Okay. So done again. I'll either have to speak more quickly to these slides or, you know. No. Okay. So we had a couple of action items from the last meeting. Policy 3602, pending approval at each step, remaining step of the process, APRICOT Secretariat to implement the proposal. So there were some suggested changes to the APRICOT policy development process, some refinements and some changes. They reached consensus at the last meeting, and they were implemented on the 19th of February. and that one's closed off. There was also Prop 107, which was to do with AS number transfer policy proposal. So we reached consensus on that, and we're still waiting on the implementation. And I suspect Adam can tell us a little bit more about that in his report. Again, a proposal 105, distribution of returned IPv4 address blocks, again reached consensus at APNIC 36, and that one will be implemented immediately in line with the activation of that global policy on post-exhaustion of IPv4 allocation mechanisms. So there's been some discussion on that in the ASO about when that should happen, and I think it's fair to say that in general, most people were in favour of, as soon as that policy kicked in, we would get on with this process. But again, Adam, I suspect you can tell us a little bit more. Yeah. So just to recap on the, sorry, you can do the next one. On the policy development process, most of you, I suspect, are familiar with this, but some of you may not be, and so we briefly go through so that everybody's on the same page. So our charter is to develop policies and procedures which relate to the management and use of internet address resources by APNIC, NIRs and ISPs within the Asia-Pacific region. You can find out more if you join the mailing list, the SIG policy at apnic.net. And there's a web address where on the website which will take you to some documentation about how all that works. And if we could have the next one, Sally. Yeah. So the way the process works, we have a proposal submission. We have those reasonably well in advance of the meeting so that those can go out on the mailing list for discussion. The chairs follow that discussion on the mailing list and sort of take note of what's been said there. Then we come to this meeting where there's a formal proposal at the meeting, and we look to have some discussion and see whether the community here actually can reach consensus on something. If that happens, we go ahead to consensus at the AMM. We notify the AMM, and they also endorse our proposals if necessary. We have had a change in our comment period to confirm consensus. It is now 4 weeks instead of 8 weeks. So after the meeting tomorrow, if any proposal has gone forward, we'll have a discussion period of 4 weeks. The community felt that we didn't, in general, have much discussion on anything after, and immediately after the meeting. And so we were waiting for 8 weeks and nothing was happening. There is a discretion in there for the chairs to extend that period. If there's extensive discussion, then clearly we're in problems with consensus, so we can extend that, or I think I can extend that at my discretion, and keep going until we either reach consensus or we agree we haven't. It then goes to the EC, Executive for endorsement, and then there's a draft put together of what the policy, actual wording of the policy changes would look like. That again goes out for editorial comment. That's not talking about the substance of the proposal and the policy documents. It's talking about whether we've actually captured it correctly. And then if that all goes smoothly, we go to implementation. And that can be quite quick, or it can take longer depending on how technically complex or whatever it is. We reach our decisions by consensus, so we were looking for general agreement, taking comments on the mailing list and at the meeting. We use a process of showing hands as a way of broadly gauging opinion. It's not a vote. It's not a matter of the majority holds this. We're really looking for everybody to be, or a very large number of people to be in general happy with a proposal before we would proceed with it. We take comments via remote participation, and there's a couple of definitions which we have sort of taken on board from the tower of the ITF. A very large majority of those who care must agree. And any strongly held objections should be debated or must be debated until most people are satisfied that the objections are wrong. So it's really trying to bring everybody into the camp and say, yep, this is okay, I can live with this, I'm comfortable, whatever, you know, those are different ways of thinking about that. And just some sort of definitions, I suppose, definitions of minor objections would be some problems may occur for some members of the group. And a major objection would be constituted by major problems will occur for parts of the community. And you know, we work in a spirit of cooperation. We try to work together to resolve issues here and get a good decision that everybody can live with. There's some references here that you can look at. The policy development process, the SIG guidelines, the mailing list archive, and the how to get a subscription to that. So if you want to look at those things, we can you can go and look at those. And I think that's the end of that part. So any questions on any of that? Okay. So our next item is the Secretariat report on the policy implementations. Adam will give us that. Thank you, Adam.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Adam Gosling. I'm Secretariat staff. Sonny, am I driving this or? Oh, okay. Great. So, good morning, everybody. At APRICOT 36 in last August in Xi'an, the policy SIG, or the open policy meeting, it's really loud, considered 3 policy proposals. I'm just going to go and give you an update of where we're at in terms of implementation of those. They all reached consensus. They were all endorsed by the EC. And in fact, they've all gone through their editorial comment period. So Prop 108, changes to the APRICOT PDP. Andy's already mentioned what those changes were. So it affected the comment period, the final call after we've reached consensus at this meeting. I implemented that on the 19th of February, and I have to admit that I timed that so that the previous PDP version 1 lasted for 10 years. So then I didn't have to change too many numbers on it. So we were very successful with our PDP, the first PDP. We got 10 years use out of it, and now we're in version 2, and it's only a very slight change. So that's done and dusted. The other proposals are a little more complicated. Prop 107, AS number transfer policy proposal. So this proposal, on the face of it, looked fairly straightforward to implement. We have a IPv4 transfers system already in place. When they kind of delved in and got their hands dirty on it, there was a couple of things to do, and so I understand the coding for that will be finished by the 1st of March. We then will continue with some more testing, update the website, that sort of thing. So we've put a implementation date of Wednesday the 16th of April on that, and hopefully that doesn't cause anyone any inconvenience. In general, our implementation time frame is 3 months, or a minimum 3 months. Some things like the PDP, it's a change in the documentation, and sometimes it might just be a change of procedures. It can be quite easy. Of course, when software gets involved, we need to schedule that into their workflow and such, so it can be a little bit more complicated and happens at the expense of some other improvements. This last one, Prop 105, distribution of returned IPv4 address blocks, is a little bit more complicated in that the trigger is outside our control. So So while I've done the policy documentation and the documents are there, I'm not publishing them. We're not changing any kind of public-facing web information. We have some work to do in the ARM system and at the back end. All of the actual implementation can proceed within APNIC, but we don't want to kind of switch it on, if you know what I mean, until we actually have those resources in our back pocket. And that's determined by external influences. And so if anyone isn't aware of this proposal, the IANA currently has a pool of returned IPv4 blocks, which there is a global policy that dictates how they will be redistributed to the RIRs. And they're, Leo can talk you through, if anyone is really interested in exactly how that will happen. They've written, the IANA has written an algorithm to manage the distribution of those. And I spoke to Leo yesterday about it, and he said once the trigger is reached, the IANA will be pretty much ready to proceed with it fairly quickly. However, no one knows, we don't know, and no one can really guarantee when that trigger will be reached, because it is dependent on one of the RIRs reducing their pool to a /9. Now, that's kind of the tricky thing, and relying on Jeff's exhaustion predictions, which we have been for a few years, and they're usually pretty accurate, and as you can see, I meant to bring a pointy thing with me. If you can see, there's LACNIC and ARIN regions are the likely candidates to reach a /9 next, and it depends on their policies, and it depends on their consumption rates, which of course are dictated by their community needs. If you look at the trend line that's on that graph, I picked this graph up a couple of days ago, it's kind of looking third quarter, but one from LACNIC, I kind of asked the question, because if you look at the graph, the brown one here is LACNIC, and it's kind of running below trend at the moment. And certainly in the APNIC region, when we got close to our exhaustion point, it got pretty busy, and everyone realised and got their paperwork together and came and applied for space. So it's quite possible that LACNIC might be the first, and I'm really guessing here, and Jeff's coming to the mic, so he might be able to help me out, but it's quite possible that LACNIC could hit that point quite soon. And I recognise Jeff.
Yeah, hi, Jeff Houston, APNIC. Firstly, with LACNIC, LACNIC have two prior track records, the way APNIC ran out and the way the RIPE NCC ran out. APNIC used up 3/8s in about as many months, so their final period of allocations were extremely steep, whereas the RIPE NCC, in effect, had a very orderly exhaustion, and the rate for the last 3 years was much the same as the rate in the last 3 months. LACNIC believe, internally and by their May pronouncement, that they will replicate the APNIC experience. And if you actually put APNIC on LACNIC's trajectory, May looks pretty good. LACNIC have not reserved any space, so they will go past a /9 threshold, absolutely. And by the look of things, you could say with 99% confidence, it will occur sometime between April and October, right? Because if they do an orderly thing, it will take forever. ARIN are a little bit more confusing because they have already reserved a /10 for the post-exhaustion period. And all of us, including ARIN, are a little bit unsure about the interpretation of what a final /9 is when they've got this /10 slightly to one side. My graphs interpret it that it's whatever you've got, however you reserve it. If ARIN have a different interpretation, and IANA about ARIN's block, that sort of fuzzes it a bit. But at this point, LACNIC appears to be the determinant. If the South Americans and their Latino blood take over, April is a certainty. If they're a little bit more ordered about this, it'll be sometime across the southern winter. In other words, May to August-ish. So we'll see, but that's the background to those numbers. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jeff. I was going to ask you that question next week, and so now you're off the hook for that. So this is kind of like, subject to what Jeff's just said, it's kind of likely to happen soon, which is kind of good news for the APRICOT community, because there's quite a lot of demand for V4 space out there. And another bite of the cherry, another pool, another kind of final pool will help some people. I want to go back. I guess I could call for questions there, because those are the current kind of policy proposals we have on the books. This is an older one, and it's been implemented quite a long time ago. And sorry, I didn't put the implementation date on there. It's on the status page for the proposal. Prop 101, removing the multi-homing requirement from V6 assignments. When it reached consensus, there was some concern that this may result in a huge uptick in assignments because we reduced the needs criteria. And there was a fair degree of concern and objection, but at the end of the day, the community decided to give it a go and to keep a watchful eye on it, and the chairs asked for me to continue to report on it. And so we published this graph, and it's available. I've got the URL there, but it's available from the status page of the proposal itself. And as you can see there, actually this one is better, it was implemented on the 18th of February, so it's 1 year since. You can see between the 2012 and the 2013, and if we say that 2013 number of assignments is pretty much a whole year, there wasn't a huge uptick. And in fact, I asked the host masters, and they've had 2 requests approved under this assignment policy. There were a couple of actually other requests, but then it turned out they'd ticked the wrong box. So it hasn't had a huge impact. I guess you could also say that it wasn't particularly needed, except for those 2 requests. They probably appreciate it. They both came from the same economy. Coincidentally, but that's all I have. If there's no questions, I'll... Oh, actually, I have a question myself. Would you like me to continue to report this for a bit longer? At the next meeting?
Let's ask the community. Turn around.
Jeff did that.
I know.
You said you'd throw him out.
It's very disconcerting.
I know it's very disconcerting, but I don't want to look at you. You know, see?
Tim Pemberton, Internet NZ. I would very much like Adam to continue the reporting of this. I think it's very useful, and yes, please.
Yeah,
It would be my pleasure, Dan.
I'm very sorry. Your entertainment is very fun, but we had a camera for remote participants, so please do not move.
So for those who came in late, one of the things I've turned the mic round because I'd actually like people to address their remarks to the community, not to me and Masato, because we're talking to each other. This is a discussion, and you're not trying to convince me about stuff. You're trying to convince members of the community. It's more appropriate when we're talking about the proposals. So yes, I think given that it's a trivial thing to sort of just keep track of, let's do it at least for the next meeting and see how we go.
Okay, thank you.
So our next item is Prop 111. And Tomohiro is going to present to us on that and explain why he thinks it's a good idea and so on. So thank you.
You may use this. It seems to work quite well forward and back. What? Forward, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Adam and Andy. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tomohiro Fujisaki, work for NTT Japan. And here I speak about the request-based expansion of IPv6 default allocation size. Okay, this shows the proposal abstract. And in this proposal, I propose to allow LIRs to receive an IPv6 allocation up to /29 from /32 to the /29 by request basis. Okay, in the next few slides, I explain why I propose this. And as many of you know, IPv6 minimum allocation size to LIRs is defined as /32. And I think it's better to expand this minimum allocation size /32 up to /29 following reasons. And first point is address block usage. And before sparse allocation mechanism implemented in late 2006, /29 was reserved for all /32. And I think these blocks might be kept unused in near future, in the future. And APRICOT Secretariat provides this information, and thank you. And totally 220 allocations were made in this block. And about the current address allocation scheme, we use the sparse allocation mechanism to distribute the IPv6 address. And this figure shows this mechanism, and the block total, with this mechanism, the first allocation will be made from the first start block of this address range, and the second allocation made in the middle of this address range, and third is between the first and second allocation, and the fourth is, and so on. Yeah. So there will be some gaps between allocations, and I think that because of the backward compatibility, the gap, it is expected that the gap will be bigger than /29 because of the backward compatibility. And this information also provided by the APRICOT Secretariat, but the current /32 allocations from the current block can grow up /24 at this stage. And next point is easier traffic control. In the current global routing table, we can observe some IP address prefixes longer than /32, such as /33, 34, and 35. And some of them will be because of the traffic control by LIRs. But I found that some filtering recommendations recommend that the prefixes longer than /32 will be filtered. And in my proposal text, I put the difference to such kind of recommendations. So if you have the interest in such recommendation, please refer my proposal text. And third point is the less number of announced prefix. This is just a possibility, but I think the case one here and compared to its case one and case two here, and case one that LIRs obtains just 29 first at once is smaller announcement of the IPv6 prefix rather than case two, which LIR obtains /32 and /31 and /30. This is just the possibility. So I propose to change the current IPv6 allocation policy as follows. For the initial allocation, I add the following text, the red text that mentions that for allocation up to /29, it requires no additional document. And for the existing IPv6 address space holders, just same as the initial allocation that LIRs can obtain up to /29 without any document. And this slide shows the situation in other LIRs. And in live region, this kind of policy, almost same as this policy, already adopted and implemented. The layout in live NCC can get up to 29 by default. And this is the pros and cons of my proposal. The advantage is just same as the reason why I propose that it is possible to utilize address blocks which is potentially unused into the future. And second point is LIRs can control traffic easier. And the third point is LIRs can design their network more flexibly with the large block size. And about disadvantages, that maybe there are some opinions that this policy will lead to insufficient utilization of IPv6 address space, but I think this will not occur because if LIRs got the larger address block, they have to pay more maintenance fee to the APNIC. Actually, the fee is not the part of the policy, but because of this, I don't think that this will not happen. And this is impact on the current features for that. And I think this policy has no impact to existing holders if they need not the more address space. And one more point, NIRs have to implement this policy if this policy is adopted by the APNIC. Okay, this is summary, and I propose to allow LIRs to receive an IPv6 allocation up to trust 29. And advantages here, so okay, this is end of my presentation. Is there any questions or comments?
I said earlier that when AFTAB was here, I would point out to people, come face it, AFTAB, we're going to see all these latecomers, they're not get here for the instructions. This is AFTAB Siddiqui, who many of you know, but AFTAB is also on the ASO NRO, and I wanted people to know who he was, but AFTAB, go.
Do I have to wear a cap as well? Anyway, it feels so odd. So before getting into the discussion, we already had a very long discussion on the mailing list on the very same topic. I would like to request Secretariat to share two details with me, with the audience and everybody. What was the whole idea behind the allocating /22 and reserving /29 initially? And what is the growth rate of new IPv6 allocation for at least 2013? May I?
So is there someone from the Secretariat who could comment on that? Or?
Sanjay from APNIC. So the first question is, what's the reason of reserving at 29? I believe it's actually a policy at that time that says that reservation up to 29 was, and it was a very old policy at the time. So I'm not sure if that's relevant anymore now. Growth of V6 delegation. You can probably see it tomorrow in our, or actually you've seen it in the APNIC services session this week, earlier this week. We're seeing a declining number of delegation on IPv6, slight declining, but that is probably because people who has got a V6 generally don't come back. Now, there are two possibilities there. One is they haven't used it, or number two, they actually have enough. So we don't know that. The further study needs to be done. Does that answer the questions after? Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Cool. Sorry, this is just so that I can talk to the proposer as well as the community. I'll find a new place for my next question. Oh, cool. Yeah. Is this okay for the cameras as well?
No, they told me that's fine.
Okay, cool. All right. So the two questions I have, one question is for the Secretariat and the other question is for the proposer.
Yep.
So part of the rationale behind this proposal seems to be that if you want to do traffic engineering on V6, that it's difficult to do that by using multiple longer prefix announcements because you can't announce longer than a 32 and expect it to be carried in the global table. So the way that this policy seems to be addressing that is by just saying, well, the way we'll solve this is just allow larger allocations. Okay. So one of my questions is around, well, given that the actual use of the addresses within that block doesn't increase, there's no more addresses being used, we're just allowing a much larger block so that we can cut it up and have it routable. I don't know that that constitutes a good use of address space and may have implications on the HD ratio and that sort of thing. My other question is my understanding was that traffic engineering was a valid justification for allocations today. So under current policy, if a proposer were to come to the hostmasters and say, in terms of addressing, I actually only have a need for a 32, but I want to do this traffic engineering. Could I have a larger amount? Is that actually possible today? If it's possible under the current policies, then we don't need this. Because what my concern is by taking away the justification and the documentation, even if it's applicable for traffic engineering, if there's no justification and no documentation, then 29 becomes the new 32. People will just come and just start getting 29s because that's the minimum. And never underestimate humanity's propensity for waste. We think that we're never going to run out of V6. I guarantee there was a room of people back in there who swore they would never run out of V4. We did. Do not just arbitrarily throw these things away. If there's a reason, I'm all for it. But no documentation, no justification, just move the minimum bits and start throwing them away. I don't know that I like that. So, question for the Secretariat: is traffic engineering a valid, a valid justification for getting an increased block today? If so, I don't know that we need this proposal. Thank you.
Thanks, Dean. Sanjay again. The answer to your question is no. We don't allocate bigger space because of traffic engineering reasons. The closest to that is the policy that was just passed probably last year about the discrete network. That is in a form of traffic engineering, but it's actually very valid that you probably have a different ASN for that block. So that we allow.
Hello everybody, Aftab Siddiqui again from Cybernet. Let me just read out for the larger initial allocation policy from the APRICOT website. It says initial allocation larger than /32 may be justified if the organization provides comprehensive documentation of all the following: its existing IP4 infrastructure and customer base, its intention to provide its existing IP4 services via IPv6, its intentions to move some of the existing IP4 customer to IPv6 within 2 years. So if you have all those justifications for /29 and you are willing to pay additional 2,000 Australian dollar, then it's there. You don't need another policy just to remove the justification. So that's my case for this policy.
Jeff Houston, APRICOT, neither for nor against or anything like it, but I do think data is good, so let's have some data. Looking at the current global V6 routing table as seen both in APRICOT and by route views, 16,500 prefixes are advertised in general. across most folk. The number of prefixes of a size /32 or larger, and by larger I mean 31, 30, decreasing, 6,000. Number of prefixes /33 and smaller, 11,000. Of those 11,000, approximately 7,000 are a /48. Interesting. I even see 110 /64s and 4 /128s, but I don't think either of those are global. I think that's just some local thing. So if the general supposition is that you need a /32 to be global, the evidence that I'm seeing in today's routing table directly contradicts that assertion, and that the operating community, by and large, seem to globally propagate right up to a /48. If everyone advertised every possible /32, that's 4.5 billion routing table entries, and quite frankly, your routers will melt. The reason why folk filter on some prefix value appears to have no particular justification, because any value you like, if you consumed all the slots, your routers will melt. So in that respect, the reality out there appears to be that whatever filtering we do see, and it's not clear that there is, appears to admit /48s. Thank you.
Okay, that's an interesting set of data. Yeah, thank you for that, Jeff. Anybody else got any more comments on this? Oh, there's a comment on chat, I think. George, could you read? You haven't got it?
We got a comment from Sanjay on chat. It says, but if prefix filtering guideline change to filter all longer than /30, will we then allocate /25?
Yeah, I think Jeff's comments and the data points that Jeff has just given probably answer that question. That moving to the /30 seems unlikely at this stage. Is that fair, Jeff? Yes, so Jeff has said yes. So has anybody else got any further comments on this? Tomohiro, oh.
Kenny Huang, Executive Council member of APRICOT. The existing policy already include the concept of the proposal, unless we want to change it, the justification requirement. So basically, to fulfill that kind of requirement, we can change the existing policy or amendment and the existing allocation policy. Thank you.
Okay. Yep. All right. Fine. So, no, anybody? Neil? So, what do people feel about this? Can we? Any other comments?
So, about the comment on the net that's led by the Masato-san, I think that if the community needs to change the policy up to allow the up to the study, I think we should do that. If someone needs the things that need such kind of policy. So here, just now, we have some filtering recommendations to filter longer than 32. I found some filtering recommendation of that. So I propose just now to allow just 29. So if we need to increase the filtering criteria, we should propose such kind of policy. Yeah, that's the comment.
So I think the question here we want to look at is how many people would be in support of this proposal. So can I ask how many people strongly support this proposal? Yeah, if we can put the slide up for the...
Hi, it's Adam Gosling. Am I on? Yeah. So this is to answer Aftab's question. The data is available on our website. In 2012, there were 586 delegations which was down from 620. So since 2010, it runs like this. 2010, 652, 11, 620, 586, and then last year, 535. But the number of members taking those delegations is reducing as well. So in our most recent year, we did 535 delegations to 380 members. But the size was growing, right? So there's less members taking bigger chunks more often. So in 2013, there were 75 billion 56s, which was up from 63 billion the year before. Am I making sense? So the number of members taking delegations is going down, but they're taking bigger chunks more often. And it's around about 535. Now, to put that in perspective, using the sparse allocation method, we asked Wang Liang how long it's going to take before we kind of start bumping it up against the numbers we're talking about here with Tomohiro's proposal in hand. And I think it was like 30,000 delegations before we reach a /28 or something. So.
Can you
Aftab Siddiqui once again. Just to add one thing that anybody from those allocation 535 in 2013, anyone requested /29 or justified any /29?
I would imagine so. Yeah. There's certainly some big allocations in there. Services.
Yes, I can remember approving a few that is 30. Can't remember if there's any 29 though. I think there's a 20 last year. That's the biggest that we. Or 22. Sorry. Yeah. There's one very big one from China. That's the biggest we had last year.
Yeah, Aftab Siddiqui again. Thank you, Sanjay. So that concludes. That should conclude everything. That even a proper justification for, let's say, safely /22 or /23 is acceptable to APRICOT, then why not /29? Thank you.
Run an input on that note. But we're talking about two different things here, right? One is justifying having an address need for a larger allocation. Well, in fact, from what I understand, the motivation of this proposal is for traffic engineering reasons. Not that you necessarily need to prove a need for an allocation larger than a /32.
Sorry, yeah, yes, yeah.
I'd actually, because I know, because in the RIPE region you have this policy at the moment, you can get just a /32 is the default allocation, but you can get up to /29 without having to justify it further. But I'd like to ask the reasoning behind it, because I don't actually remember it being traffic engineering. I think it was the idea was simply that we want to give people a large enough chunk for them to grow without having to come back to the RIPE NCC, right?
Yes, Ingrid from RIPE NCC. The reason for having the /29 without justification in our region was there were people making proposals for all sorts of transition mechanics and 6RD, and this the proposals for 6RD, etc., did not go through, and so instead the proposal was made to allow /29 without further justification. So this would cater for all needs. If people want to use this transition technique or the other, it should all fit within the /29. And now we see that the vast majority request the /29 as a first allocation, and most of the LARs that got one a /32 before, almost all of them have been extended to a /29. And we hardly received any larger blocks than that since then. Most of them are /29.
Thank you. Can I comment on that then? When we talk about what's a reasonable allocation size, I mean, we don't have a lot of experience with IPv6. We know that those who request IPv6 space in all regions, they get a big chunk and they don't come back so far. So it's hard to know what is a reasonable size. We've had this discussion many, many times. But we've also had the discussion about what is routable. And I think we've had it in the V4 space, we've had it in the V6 space, and clearly you see a lot of longest prefixes in the routing table. I find it difficult to justify simply based on routability a larger address block. I think it's even stated still, I hope, in the V6. Policy document that routability isn't guaranteed. We know in the V4 space we've had the discussions also with PI assignments or multi-homing by assigning multi-homing in the PA allocations, that these things can change. So if we allow larger blocks now so that we can announce /32 out of our /29, then maybe people will adjust their routing filters, because they don't base it on these things, they base it on what they want to route. So I think, first of all, I find it difficult to justify simply based on routability, and secondly, reality will change as you adjust the allocation sizes. Thank you.
Quickly.
I have a comment from the Jabiru. Sanjeev Gupta says that he has a /32 and he is announcing /48, and when he checks in looking glasses at places like Equinix, he sees his routes propagating quite freely. So he just wanted to put a data point in. He has, however, 48 route objects and they are signed over by APRICOT. So.
Dean Pemberton, Internet NZ. I think, I don't support the proposal as it stands, and the main reason is the no justification, no documentation to take it from R30 up to 29. But I would support us discussing a subsequent proposal down the track to look at what other justifications might be appropriate to add to the list that the host masters considered. So we've heard that at the moment traffic engineering is not considered. If the community considers traffic engineering as this proposal does to be something that should be considered, I would very much like to see that proposal, and we could discuss that, and I think that may achieve some of the same ends.
And just one point I want to say again is, in my proposal, I don't propose to allocate a new address block, but I only allocate the reserved address book or the unused address in the future. So I don't think, I think, we need no.
So my understanding of the sparse address space is that while those blocks are reserved today, they're not allocated, and there's no guarantee that those addresses will go to the person that has the 32. If we needed that space in the future, it may well go to someone else. I don't want to see a situation where again we've got addresses that aren't currently being used allocated out to people and no ability to redistribute them. I think there'll be people here, and there's certainly people in the developing nation community that aren't that happy about people having more addresses than they need and no ability to get them back and reallocate them. So those addresses are reserved, but they're not allocated for a reason. If you have a need, then you can get them. If you don't have a need, then you can't get them. I think that's the right mechanism.
David Farmer, Aaron AC. I just thought I'd throw in a couple years back, Aaron simplified the justifications for getting larger blocks. So there's still a justification, but they're simplified. They're relatively there's a formula you can use to get bigger blocks quite easily and justify that. But if you don't want to do any justification, you can only get a 32. Just something you might want to look at.
So any further comments on this? Okay, well, look, yeah.
Hi, this is Izumi. I'm just sharing what we discussed within our community in Japan. And our ISP seem to be quite supportive of this proposal. And the idea behind it, we are very much aware from the proposal at RIPE and that the default size, is it the default size, or it's able to expand up to /29. And I think the people who express support are giving the reason that even though you are not able to justify the need at this stage, it does add more flexibilities in being able to receive larger size to prepare for future expansions and things like that. And in terms of 6RD, we do have a separate policy that accommodates it, so that probably doesn't really fit in with this proposal. So just sharing our discussions.
Okay, so I think we should test the views of the community here and see what you think. So I'm going to put the summary of the proposal up here. Yes, we've got it. This proposal modifies the eligibility for an organisation to receive an initial IPv6 allocation up to a /29 by request basis. So I'm going to ask for these 5 categories and see what people come up with. So those people who strongly support this proposal, can I see your hands, please? I see, Okay. And just support, so not strongly support, but support it. People who are neutral about it. People who oppose this. So George is indicating there's one person, so I'm seeing 2, few, yes. And people who strongly oppose this. Okay. Yeah. So let me see those people who strongly oppose this, and let's have both of those, strongly oppose and oppose, right? Okay, and those people who are on the other side of the coin, the strongly support and support. I don't think we reached consensus on this.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay, so there's a script here that actually says what we're supposed to say. Keep Craig happy and everybody else. Okay. This policy proposal has been discussed on the APNIC policy SIG mailing list and at today's open policy meeting. The APNIC PDP requires the community to reach consensus or a general agreement on the proposal before it can proceed. I've conferred with my co-chair, and we have noted the community's comments for and against this. And on consideration of these inputs, we believe that the community has not reached a consensus on the proposal. Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Now, we're at okay, there's another piece, all right. Yeah. As the proposal has failed to reach a consensus on, as the community has failed to reach a consensus on this proposal, the chairs will send this back to the mailing list and the author to consider whether it can be amended or should be abandoned. I'm hearing some talk in here that there are some ways that a proposal like this or addressing this issue could be adopted by the community, but it's not in this form. So let's rethink this, and if necessary, bring back another proposal which addresses this problem in a different way. So that those people who may want to attend the discussions on the next piece of the agenda can be here. I'm not going to bring things forward, so I'm just going to finish this session off, and then we'll deal with the Secretariat report on policy documentation and Prop 110 in the second session starting at 11 o'clock. So we're just going to have a longer coffee break, or you can read some more email, or you can download the new version of macOS and get your systems up to date, or fix your NTP servers, or... Okay, so we'll break now and we'll come back at 11, but please come back sharp on